elasticity of demand. Mathematically, the price elasticity of demand is calculated by dividing the percentage change in quantity demanded caused by the percentage change in price of a commodity. The price elasticity of demand is unit free since it is the ratio of 2%. It is unit free. That means we cannot measure the price elasticity of demand using meter, kilometer, liter, or other units of measurement. The price elasticity of demand is always negative. This is due to the law of demand, which states that ceteris paribus, as price of a commodity increases, the corresponding quantity demanded for that commodity will decline, and with the fall in the price of a commodity, then the corresponding quantity demanded for that commodity will increase. Due to this inverse relationship between the changes in price and the changes in the quantity demanded, then the price elasticity of demand is always negative. So it relies between negative infinity and 0, but in order to avoid this negative effect, we will put it into absolute value, and it relies between 0 and positive infinity. Now let's see the measurement of the price elasticity of demand. Price elasticity of demand is measured in two ways called the point price elasticity of demand and the arc price elasticity of demand. Now let's see the point price elasticity of demand. The point price elasticity of demand formula measures elasticity of demand at a point on a linear demand curve, and the price elasticity of demand is mathematically calculated by dividing the change in Q for the change in P multiplied by the initial price divided by the initial quantity. Suppose price of a kilogram of orange is given, which is ruble, and the demand function is given as quantity demand, which is equal to 80 minus 4p. Now, from this given information, we can calculate the price elasticity of demand. So the first step is, in order to get the initial quantity, let's substitute the given price on the demand function. That is QD equals to 80 minus 4p, and then when we substitute this given price 3 bar, this is 4 multiplied by the given price is 3, and then this is 18 minus 4 times 3 is 12, then the initial quantity is 6. So we get the initial quantity and take the given price as initial price. When we come across to the formula, the price elasticity of demand at a point is calculated by dividing the change in Q for the change in P multiplied by the initial price divided by the initial quantity. But we have the initial price and the initial quantity, but we don't have the value of the change in Q for the change in P. But there is a means of getting the change in Q for the change in P. In order to get the value of the change in Q for the change in P, we have to get first the slope of the demand function, because the slope is calculated by dividing change in P for the change in Q. Then once if you get the slope, then we can use the reciprocal of the slope of the demand function to get the value of change in Q for the change in P. And from your previous lessons, simply by working from the given demand function, you can identify the slope of the demand function. The slope of the demand function is the reciprocal of the coefficient of price. The coefficient of price is minus 4, and the reciprocal of the coefficient of price is minus 1 over 4. So we get the slope. If the slope, the value of change in P for the change in Q is minus 1 over 4, then the value of change in P, change in Q for the change in P will be minus 4. Simply, you can take the coefficient itself, because reciprocal is the number or the value itself. So the price elasticity of demand is minus 4 multiplied by the initial price is the given price, which is 3, divided by the initial quantity is 6, and then when we cancel, by 3 1, by 3 2, by 2 1, by 2 2, then we left with -2. And when we put it out of absolute value, we left with 2. So the price elasticity of demand is 2. The second method of calculating the price elasticity of demand is the arc price elasticity of demand. It is used to measure price elasticity of demand between 2 points on a linear demand curve. And the formula is the price elasticity of demand, which is equal to the quantity final minus the quantity initial, which is a change in quantity, divided by the price final minus price initial, which is a change in price, multiplied by price final plus price initial, divided by quantity final plus quantity initial. Now, from this example, let me show you the way of calculating the price elasticity of demand using the arc formula. The most important procedure to calculate any type of elasticity of demand and supplies is identifying the given information correctly. Once if you identify the given information correctly, it's so simple to calculate the price elasticity of demand and the other types of elasticities of demand and supply, because the formulas are almost similar for all types of elasticities. So from this information, suppose as price of a kilogram of orange increase from 20 to 13, that means the initial price is given, which is 20, and the final price is 30. Remember here, when we say initial price, we are not referring the list price, rather the price which comes first is considered as initial. And again, when we say the final value, we are not referring the largest value, rather the value which comes last is considered as final. As a result, what would happen to the quantity demanded? The quantity demanded declines from 8 kilogram to 2 kilogram. That means the quantity was initially 8 kilogram and finally it declined to 2. Now, when we come across to the solution part, the price elasticity of demand is calculated by dividing the change in Q, which is Q final minus Q initial, divided by the change in P, which is P final minus P initial, multiplied by P final plus P initial, divided by Q final plus Q initial. So when we substitute this information on this formula, the value of Q final is 2 minus Q initial is 8, divided by P final is 30 minus P initial is 20, multiplied by P final is 30 plus P initial is 20, divided by Q final is 2 plus Q initial is 8. So the price elasticity of demand will be 2 minus 8 is minus 6, divided by 30 minus 20 is 10, multiplied by 30 plus 20 is 50, divided by 2 plus 8 is 10. Now when we cancel 1 0 for 1 0, by 5 1, by 5 2, and by 2 1, by 2 3, and then the price elasticity of demand equals to minus 3, and when we put it out of absolute value, we left with 3. This is the way of calculating the price elasticity of demand using the arc formula. Now let's see the ranges of price elasticity of demand called the elastic, inelastic, and unit elastic. The buyer is said to be elastic or more than unit elastic if the percentage change in quantity demanded is greater than the percentage change in price. That means if a little change in price of a commodity leads to a higher change in quantity demanded, then the buyer is said to be elastic or more than unit elastic, indicating that he is very sensitive, very responsive to changes in price of a commodity. Mathematically, after calculating the price elasticity of demand, if you got price elasticity of demand value which is greater than 1, then you can consider the buyer as elastic or more than unit elastic. For example, a 5% increase in price of weight leads to a 20% decline in quantity demanded. A 5% increase in price of a commodity is a little increment in price of a commodity. but the resulting decrement in quantity demanded is more than the increment in price, which is a 20% decline in quantity demanded. A 5% increase in price is a little increment, but the decrement in quantity demanded is more than the increment in price of a commodity. This indicates that the buyer is elastic, indicating that he is very sensitive, very responsive to changes in price. Here, a 5% increase in price leads to a 20% decrease in quantity demanded. Means, in other words, if the price of a commodity declines by 5%, the resulting demand will also increase by 20%. Here, don't care about the signs increase and decrease. Simply watch the numbers that are attached in the price and quantity demanded side. If the number that's attached in the price side is too small, whether it increases or decreases, and if the number that's attached is large, whether it increases or decreases, then the buyer is said to be elastic, indicating that he's very sensitive, very responsive to changes in price of a commodity. Mathematically, the price elasticity of demand is calculated by dividing the percentage change in quantity demanded for the percentage change in price, which is equal to the percentage change in quantity demanded is a 20% increase or decrease in quantity demanded is caused by a 5% increase or decrease in price of a commodity. And then when we cancel percent for percent, 20 for 5, then we left with 4. Mathematically, after calculating the price elasticity of demand, if you get price elasticity of demand value which is greater than 1, then the buyer is said to be elastic. So this 4 tells us a 1% increase or decrease in price of a commodity leads to a 4% increase or decrease in quantity demanded. That means a 1% increase in price of a commodity leads to a 4% decline in quantity demanded, and a 1% decrease in price of a commodity leads to a 4% increase in quantity demanded. This is the way of calculating the elastic range. For example, consider that price of weight increased from birth 2 to 3. That means price was initially birth 2 and finally it increased to birth 3. As a result, the quantity demanded of weight declines from 90 kg to 10 kg. That means the initial quantity is 90 kg and the final quantity is 10 kg. And when we substitute this information on this, the arc price elasticity of demand formula, then we get for this 4 tells us the buyer is elastic. Graphically, the elastic range of price elasticity of demand is a flatter demand curve. For example, the price increased from 2 to 3. This is a little increment in price, but the resulting decrement in quantity demanded is from 90 to 10. That means the buyer is very sensitive or very responsive. In contrast, if the price declines from 3 to 2, the reduction in price is too small, but the increment in quantity demanded is too large. It is from 10 kg to 90 kg. Now, let's see the inelastic range of price elasticity of demand. The buyer is said to be inelastic if the percentage change in price is greater than the percentage change in quantity demanded. That means, even though there is a higher change in price of a commodity, if the resulting change in quantity demanded is too small, then the buyer is said to be inelastic, indicating that he is less sensitive, less responsive to changes in price of a commodity, or simply careless to changes in price of a commodity. Mathematically, after calculating the price elasticity of demand, if you got elasticity of demand value that relies between 0 and 1, then you can conclude that the buyer is inelastic. For example, a 50% increase in price is a large increment in price, but the resulting decrement in quantity demanded is lesser than the increment in price of a commodity. From this example, a 50% increase in price of a commodity leads to only a 10% decline in quantity demanded. That means the increment in price is too large, but the decrement in quantity demanded is too small. The buyer is careless to changes in price, and the buyer is said to be inelastic. A 50% increase in price of a commodity leads to a 10% decrement in quantity demanded. Means if there is a decline in price of a commodity by 50%, then the corresponding quantity demanded will increase only by 10%. In this case, the buyer is said to be inelastic. Mathematically, the price elasticity of demand is calculated by dividing the percentage change in quantity demanded for the percentage change in price. And from this information, the percentage change in quantity demanded is 10% and the percentage change in price is 50%, and this is 0.2. This tells us mathematically, after calculating the price elasticity of demand, if you got elasticity of demand values that lies between 0 and 1, then the buyer is said to be inelastic, indicating that he is less sensitive or less responsive to changes in price, or simply careless to changes in price. This 0.2 price elasticity of demand value refers a 1% increase or decrease in price of a commodity leads to a 0.2% increase or decrease in quantity demanded. That means a 1% increase in price decreases quantity demanded by 0.2, and a 1% decrement in price leads to a 0.2% increase in quantity demanded. Mathematically, consider that the price of weight increases from 10 to 90. As a result, the quantity demanded of weight declines from 3 kg to 2. And that means the price was initially 10 and finally it increased to 90. As a result, the initial quantity was 3 kg and the final quantity is 2 kg. And when we substitute this information on this formula, we get 0.25. This 0.25 relies between 0 and 1. Hence, the buyer is said to be inelastic. Graphically, the demand curve for the inelastic range is a steeper demand curve. From this example, the price increased from 10 to 90. As a result, the quantity demand declined only from 3 kg to 2 kg. Conversely, as price declines from 90 to 10, then the quantity demand will increase only from 2 kg to 3. This shows that the buyer is inelastic. Thirdly, the buyer is said to be unit elastic if the percentage change in price is equal to the percentage change in quantity demanded. That means if there is proportional change between price and quantity demanded, then the buyer is said to be unit elastic. That means the buyer is neither very sensitive nor less sensitive to changes in price of a commodity. For example, a 30% increase in price of weight leads to a 30% decline in quantity demanded. That means a 30% increase in price leads to a 30% decline in quantity demanded. That means a 30% increase in price leads to a 30% decrement in quantity demanded. Means if the price of a commodity declines by 30%, then the quantity demanded will increase by 30%. So there is proportional changes between price and quantity demanded. Mathematically, the price elasticity of demand is calculated by dividing the percentage change in quantity demanded for the percentage change in price. And from this example, the percentage change in quantity demanded is 30% and the percentage change in price is 30%. When we cancel 30% for 30%, then we get 1. This 1 tells us a 1% increase or decrease in price leads to a 1% increase or decrease in quantity demanded. That means as price increases by 1%, then quantity demanded declines by 1%. And as price declines by 1%, quantity demanded will increase by 1%. Consider that price of weight increases from 20 to 40. As a result, quantity demanded of weight declines from 6 kg to 3 kg. Then the given information is the initial price is 20, the final price is 40 bar. As a result, the initial quantity is 6 kg and the final quantity is 3 kg. And when we substitute on this arc formula, then we get the price elasticity of demand, which is 1. And mathematically, after calculating the price elasticity of demand, if you get the price elasticity of demand value that is 1, then the buyer is said to be unit elastic. Graphically, the price increased from 20 to 40, which means the price is doubled. As a result, what would happen to quantity demanded? The quantity demanded is halved. And the opposite holds true. That means as price declines from 40 to 20, quantity demanded increases from 3 to 6. This is the elastic demand curve. Now let's see the range of elasticity of demand on a linear demand curve. This line classifies the x and y axes into two. And from this midpoint, the midpoint is unit elastic. That means the price elasticity of demand is 1. As one moves towards the y-axis from the midpoint, elasticity tends to be greater and greater. And finally, at this point, the price elasticity of demand is infinity, and this linear demand curve will have a characteristics of demand curve which is horizontal straight line demand curve. This demand curve is called perfectly elastic demand curve. As one moves from the midpoint towards the x-axis, elasticity tends to be lesser and lesser. And then at this point, finally, the price elasticity of demand will be 0, and this linear demand curve becomes a vertical straight line demand curve with price elasticity of demand value of 0. From this, let's see the exceptional types of demand curves called perfectly elastic and perfectly inelastic demand curves. The perfectly elastic demand curve indicates that any amount of a product is demanded at a fixed price, and the price elasticity of demand value of a perfectly elastic demand curve is infinity, and it is a horizontal straight line demand curve. This is the perfectly elastic demand curve. It indicates any amount of a product is demanded at this fixed price, and its price elasticity of demand value is infinity. It is a horizontal straight line demand curve. Products with unexpected price discounts have perfectly elastic demand. For example, if the price of one automobile is $5, you will buy the first, but you will not expect a reduction in price to $4 in order to get the second one. You will buy it by $5, and finally, you will buy these 3 automobiles again by $5 because the price is too cheap. So products with unexpected price discounts have perfectly elastic demand. The perfectly inelastic demand curve is a vertical straight line demand curve, and it indicates that a fixed amount of a product is demanded irrespective of changes in price of a commodity. Even though there is a higher change in price of a commodity, the resulting response changes in quantity is 0. This means the buyer will not respond at all to any change in price of a commodity. This is the perfectly inelastic demand curve. Products which are essential for survival have perfectly inelastic demand. For example, the demand for insulin is perfectly inelastic. If a diabetic needs 4 cc of insulin per day, if the price of this insulin is $10, he will buy it. If it increases to $20, he will buy it. If it also increases to $100, then this patient will buy it because it is very essential for survival. If he could not afford it, he will die. So the demand for such essential products which are essential for survival is perfectly inelastic. Now this is the price elasticity of demand and total revenue. Increasing in price of a commodity is not a guarantee for the existence of higher revenue. By default, we thought that with increase in price of a commodity, total revenue of the firm will increase. Rather, the total revenue of a firm is highly dependent on the price elasticity of demand. It is based on the buyer's response to changes in price of a commodity. Now let me show you the total revenue of the firm when the buyer is elastic, inelastic, and unit elastic. The total revenue of the firm is calculated by multiplying price with quantity. Here, if the price of a kilogram of something is per 10 and the firm sells 100 kilogram, then the total revenue will be 1000 per. Now let me show you when the buyer is elastic. If he is elastic with a little increment in price from per 10 to per 11, then the quantity demanded, the declining quantity demanded is larger. Let's take the income, the quantity demanded declined to 10 kilogram. And then what would happen to total revenue? It is 11 times 10, which is 110. So if the buyer is elastic, then with increase in price of a commodity, the total revenue of the firm will decline. So there is inverse relationship between price and total revenue. Now let me show you when there is a fall in price if the buyer is elastic. If the buyer is elastic means there is a little decrement in price. The price decreases from 10 to 9. As a result, the quantity demanded increases by higher percentage. Let's take the price increases 10 times and the quantity increased 10 times and it reached to 1000. Then 9 times 1000 is 9000. As a result, if the buyer is elastic with the fall in the price of a commodity, then the total revenue of the firm will increase. From this, we can understand that if the buyer is elastic with increase in price, total revenue will decline, and with a fall in price, total revenue will increase. Now let's see when the buyer is inelastic. Suppose if the price of a kilogram of something is per 10 and the firm sells 100 kilogram, the total revenue was 1000 per. Now if the buyer is inelastic, there is a higher increment in price. Let's take the price is increases from per 10 to 100, 10 times, multiplied by, here if the buyer is inelastic, the declining quantity demanded is too small. Let's say the buyer buys only 99 kilogram, and then the total revenue will be 99 multiplied by 100, which is 9900. So if the buyer is inelastic with increase in price of a commodity, then total revenue of the firm will also increase. Now let me show you when the buyer is inelastic and if there is a decline in price. The decline in price, if the buyer is inelastic, the decline in price is higher. Let's take the price decline from 10 to 1 per, but the increment in quantity demanded is too small. Multiplied by, let's take the quantity demanded increase by only 1 kilogram, and this is 101, and then this will give you 101 per only. That means if the buyer is inelastic with the decline in price of a commodity, total revenue of the firm will decline. So if the buyer is inelastic, there is a direct relationship between the changes in the direction of total revenue and price of a commodity. Finally, let's see when the buyer is unit elastic. That means there is proportional change in price and quantity demanded. If the price of a kilogram of something is per 10 and if the firm sells 100 units, the total revenue is 1000. Now if the price is doubled, 10, it was 10 and now it increased to 20. If the price is doubled, if the buyer is unit elastic, then the quantity demanded must be halved. That means it is 50. 20 times 50 is 1000. So if the buyer is inelastic, with increase in price of a commodity, the total revenue of the firm remains unchanged. It remains unchanged. It was 1,000 birr earlier. Now it is also 1,000 birr. Now let me show you when there is a fall in the price of a commodity. Here, if the price was birr 10, now the price is halved and it reduced to birr 5. If the buyer is inelastic, then if the price is halved, then the quantity demand must be doubled. That means it is 200. 5 times 200 is 1,000 again. So, with a fall in the price of a commodity, then if the buyer is inelastic, the total revenue of the firm will remain unchanged. From this, we can conclude that this is the change in the direction of price. With increase in price, if the buyer is elastic, total revenue will decline. If the buyer is inelastic, total revenue will increase. And if the buyer is inelastic, total revenue remains unchanged. With a fall in the price of a commodity, if the buyer is elastic, total revenue will increase. If the buyer is inelastic, total revenue will decline. And if the buyer is inelastic, the total revenue remains unchanged. Now let's see the determinants of price elasticity of demand. These are factors that makes the buyer either sensitive or less sensitive, either responsive or less responsive, elastic or inelastic. Let's see these determinants one by one. The first determinant is the availability of close substitutes. If there are more close substitutes, then the buyer will be more elastic. That means the buyer will be more sensitive, because with a little change in price of a commodity, the buyer will shift his consumption to other commodities that can substitute a product. So the more close substitutes available for a product, the more elastic will the demand for that product. The less close substitutes available for a product, the more inelastic. If we don't have any choice to substitute a commodity, then we will be less sensitive, or we will be inelastic to changes in price of that commodity. Another determinant is the proportion of income spent on a product. If you spend a smaller proportion of your income on a commodity, then you will be more inelastic. That means you will be careless to changes in price of those commodities that you spend a smaller proportion of your income. For example, chewing gum. Even though there is a higher change in the price of chewing gum, then the quantity demanded for chewing gum will not decline by higher percent. But the larger the proportion of income spent on a commodity, the more elastic will the demand for that commodity. Nature of a product is also another determinant. The demand for necessities is generally inelastic. For example, food. The demand for food is generally inelastic, but the demand for luxuries is generally elastic. That means we will be more sensitive to changes in price of luxuries. Another determinant of the price elasticity of demand is time. In the short period of time, demand for a good tends to be more inelastic. Because we don't have choice in the short period of time, since we cannot adjust our consumption or postpone our consumption, then we will be careless to changes in price of a commodity. But through long period of time, the demand for a commodity tends to be more elastic, because people can adjust their consumption, and many close substitutes are expected to be produced through time, and the demand for a commodity tends to be more elastic. The number of use of a commodity is another determinant. If the product has large number of uses, then we will be more elastic, because we can reduce the number of use of a commodity. But if it has a small number of use, then the demand for a commodity tends to be more inelastic. Finally, the habit of consumer is determinant of price elasticity of demand. Products which are bought by habit have generally inelastic demand. For example, the demand for alcoholic beverage is generally inelastic. The demand for tobacco is generally inelastic, and the demand for chat is generally inelastic. But products which are bought not by habit have generally elastic demand. Now, let me give you a revision exercise for the following two questions. First, calculate the price elasticity of demand. Second, determine the range of elasticity of demand. Third, interpret the result. And the questions are, first, suppose price of a kilogram of weight is per 10 and the demand function is given us. The